Hey there, it's Jessica Joy, but this is my story, Death Solutions. Who are we? We are individuals sharing the reality of pornography's destruction together, creating a nation without exploitation. Okay, and then they went after our religious freedom, and we just, which they used some Trojan horse called genders and all this like fairy dust and magical and love is love. But it was a weapon to do away with a hate group called Christians. So today we are addressing how to separate the schools from enforcing, endorsing, and funding what is not natural, neutral, nor leads to human flourishing. So we have a resolution. What does a resolution do? Resolutions are not law-abiding and nobody gives a care. Yeah, the left is using them. We use them for the pornography legislation. Resolutions are important. So we have a resolution, and then a resolution takes public opinion and sets a line in the sand. So we have a resolution declaring that secular humanism is a religion for the sake of the Establishment Clause, and we have so many court cases to back that up, of organized and unorganized religion that has to separate from government. Then we stack on top of that a million bills, kind of like the left machine guns. We are machine gunning away. We have a ton of bills. And this one happens to pertain to, we have 13 states that are introducing how to teach your third grader how to have anal sex. So do we just go, that's wrong? Nah. Because most states have no idea how to frame to separate this. It's faith-based and it's self-asserted. I can be Catholic one day, I can be trans the next day, I can be Mormon the next day, I can be Christian the next day, I can be Pentecostal the next day, I can be Baptist the next day, I can be a boy, I can be a girl, I can be a unicorn, I can be a pencil sharpener. Yeah, it's all faith-based. And it's all self-asserted. And we're not going to fund it anymore. Yeah. So here is our bill. And you, what do you do with it once you read this bill? Contact me. And you are going to contact your legislator. How do you fund your legislator? I never stopped asking questions. That's how I have legislation in 36 states. You go, Delta County State Legislator. And then it's going to show you the House and the Senate. Why? Because we have to pass our bills through the House and the Senate. And then it goes to the governor's desk and it's signed into law. And when does that stopwatch start? The day of opening session, which is most likely January and February. That's why we're going over this right now. Why? Because your state is choosing your platform in November and December. Why? Because they start in January. So kind of like a football game or a basketball game, the strategy is happening right now. And you want to be priority right now. If you show up in January and February, they're like, are you last? So it's so important and vital to introduce this to your local Republicans, your county's Republican leaders right now. So why do we go over definitions? This is what it sounds like to read a bill out loud. Yes. So we go over tons of definitions because for centuries, Christ followers have abandoned their post in legislation. So if more people are introducing Sharia law to legislation in the last 200 years, and less Christians are introducing what the Constitution which we are founded on, what's the law going to sound like? Sharia law. So we are going back to our Constitution, which requires going back to a law of definitions. So we start off with definitions. There's probably about a page of definitions. Why are we doing this? Because our Constitution's been hijacked. We have to bring the plumb line back. So this is most likely going to go through one of your educational committees, anything to do with children, juveniles, you name it. And your state legislator, when you choose to engage, because you're going to be held accountable for what you know right now, boom, 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 they will come up with a strategy with you on how they will get this pushed into law. So most likely it will involve the caucus. So drop that word, write that down. Caucus, Republican caucus, women's caucus. Christian caucus, prayer caucus. The caucuses make these kind of issues a priority. Why won't they make it a priority? They don't have this kind of language in front of them. Who's going to provide this language? You. How will they know if they do not hear? How will they hear if no one is sent? Yeah, that's you, folks. Okay. So in the House of Representatives by Education Committee, an act relating to sex education, amending section 33-1611 West Virginia Code to revise. Okay, can you take somebody else's state's legislation and put it in front of your state? Absolutely. So this is just an example of West Virginia. Be it enacted by the state legislature of the state of West Virginia, section 1. West Virginia Code, and hereby, blah, blah, blah. Okay, definitions. We define religion means a set of unproven answers to a greater question like, why are we here? What are we doing as humans? As predicated on an institutionalized or uninstitutionalized faith-based worldview flowing out of the community that is full of organized and has a daily code by which the members may guide their daily lives. Okay. Number 2, secular humanism means a faith-based worldview that is also referred as postmodern Western individualistic moral relativism and expressive individualism, a belief system that is protected by the free exercise clause of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and by the Constitution of the state of West Virginia, and is centered on unproven assumptions, blah, 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 blah. So we are defining their faith-based religion. Tons of court cases to back this up. The Lemon Test. Third definition here. A 3-prong test invented by the United States Supreme Court in Lemon versus Kurtzman in 1971 to determine whether a government action violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. To pass muster under the Establishment Clause, a practice must satisfy the Lemon Test, pursuant to which must, number 1, have a valid secular purpose, number 2, have the effect of advancing, endorsing, and inhibiting religion, and number 3, not foster excessive entanglement with a religion. If government action fails one prong of the Lemon Test, it violates the Establishment Clause and is unconstitutional. Yes, right now we are fully funding what is not natural, neutral, nor leads to human flourishing. Neutral. None of this stuff is neutral. It's all controversial, and we are funding it. Through coercion of our tax dollars, we are forced to commit an act of immorality. Definition. Non-secular sham means a policy, a course, or principle of action adopted and proposed by the state actor which endorses, respects, and favors the beliefs of a particular religion, whereas the preeminent and primary force driving the state's action is not genuine, but a sham that ultimately has a primary religious objective. The term refers to a type of policy that is predicated on a series of unproven faith-based assumptions and naked assertions that is implicitly religious, while masquerading as natural, neutral, and non-controversial when the claims are questionably moral, real, and plausible under the reasonable observer perspective. Yeah, that's us. Sex education program means a controversial assembly or event held at a public school at the taxpayer's expense that is calculated to proselytize, which means make a weapon, and indoctrination of minors with the government's symbolic and indirect and direct stamp of approval regarding issues relating to human sexuality, morality, same-sex sexual contact, sexual orientation, mythology, including emotional, relational, and responsibilities, human sexual anatomy, sexual activity, sexual reproduction, age of consent, reproductive health, and the doctrine of reproductive rights and the dogma of safe sex. The term refers to an event of public schools that are non-secular, offering faith-based opinions on sexual morality that flow directly out of moral relativism, amounting to a commentary on absolute truth, and is a critic on doctrines that advance absolute truth. The term refers to taxpayers funding event on sex, marriage, and morality at public schools, which targets children with a series of unproven faith-based assumptions and naked assertions, and implicitly religious and inseparably linked to the religion of secular humanism. Oh, we haven't even got to the bill. Like, we're defining who they are. Know thyself, know thy enemy. This is know thy enemy. Secular policy definition means a course of principle of action adopted or proposed by the state actor that is natural. This is secular policy. That is natural, neutral, non-controversial, that is based on self-evident morality and objective truth from the reasonable observer perspective. The term includes a procedure that is generally accomplishes its goals and does not intend to put religion over non-religion or one religion over another religion. The term includes a a course of government action where the preeminent and primary force driving the policy is genuine, not a sham, and not merely secondary to a religious objective. The term includes policies that are very soft, founded on self-evident, non-controversial, neutral, and natural morality that accords with the givenness of the nature and the truth and the way that things are and the way we are as humans from a reasonable observer perspective. Okay, so that was secular. Secular is natural, neutral, and leads to human flourishing. Secular marriage. Secular marriage means a legal union that represents an intended lifelong commitment between one person who is born male and one person who is born female as husband and wife, who are of equal but opposite genders and become spouses of the opposite sex and have a corresponding sexual anatomy that is coalesced with the actual or symbolic potential to create an offspring whom will likely have the input of the spouses with whom they share the same genetic code, an unbroken ancestral chain. With secular marriage is actual marriage. Oh, trust me, I get excited. Abstinence means an action to refrain from sexual practices until the person becomes legally married, also known as chastity. Abstinence program. Definition. It is an assembly held at a public school that is taxpayer funded where the unproven claim that healthy sex is all about the context that sex is best preserved between a man and a woman in the confines of committed secular marriage to the best enabled maximized human flourishing. The term refers to promoting the virtues, honorability, and merits of resolving to wait until a person is legally married to engage in sexual practices with their spouse of the opposite sex. Community standards of decency. This is a definition. Whether to the average person applying contemporary community standards, the dominant theme of the material taken as a whole appeals to prurient interest. I have a high school education, if I didn't make that clear yet. So if a high schooler can do this, you can do this. Non-secular marriage. Non-secular marriage. Non-secular marriage means any form of the alleged marriage that does not involve a man and a woman. The term non-secular marriage refers to a variety of so-called marriages that do not involve a man and a woman that amount to doctrines that are inseparably linked to the religion of secular humanism. Non-secular marriage is parity marriage. Non-secular marriage is parity marriage. Then 33-1609 goes into pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of case law, so that you know none of our legislation is written on thoughts and prayers. It's based on tons of lawyers sitting around collecting case law. So I'm going after pages and pages. There are taxpayers in every district who sincerely believe the ideology sermonized at sex education program is immoral, and that the enable act of immorality is an exact ideology sermonized at sex education programs is immoral and that enables acts of immorality and in itself is an act of immorality. Number 19, many taxpayers who are non-observers of the religion of secular humanism object to their tax dollars being spent to endorse the ideology being promoted at sex education programs because such an appropriations coercively causes them to violate their conscience by forcing them to indirectly endorse non-secular acts that they consider to be immoral and offensive. Number 20, sex education programs are calculated to indoctrination of children to a religious worldview, with the government stamp of approval at the expense of the taxpayers in a manner that causes taxpayers to violate their own conscience by the simple act of paying taxes. Causing the event of the causing the event to constitute an evil that the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the United States was designed to prohibit. Forcing all, number 21. So we go by lines whenever bills are getting amended. This just helps keep everybody together because they all have the bill in front of them. 21. Forcing all students to attend sex education indoctrination programs without the option of opting in conveys to the students and taxpayers that the favored religion of the school, the state, and the nation is secular humanism, causing the enforcement of sex education policies at public schools to run afoul of the Establishment Clause. Number 22, while the unproven truth claims floated at the sex education programs is protected speech under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, the state of West Virginia has a compelling interest to uphold community standards of decency. See Paris Adult Theater versus Slayton in 1973. That's a court case. We use a lot of court cases to build every sentence of our bills. 23. Sex education programs normalize false permissions, giving beliefs about sex and promote promiscuity, and is therefore disfavored speech that erodes community standards of decency and encourage various forms of sexual exploitation. Oh, we just went there. 24. For secular reasons based on self-evident morality, child custody, child support, and other public safety laws, the state of West Virginia favors abstinent programs that encourage citizens to reserve and channel their sexual energy into the context of secular marriage between a man and a woman, best maximize human flourishing. We also call that science. So the next section goes on to permitting children to participate in sex education or instruction compliance with the state law and the First Amendment Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution. Then it goes into number 1, in the view of the First Amendment Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of West Virginia. See, you have the Constitution and then your state has a Constitution. Yeah, a lot of states violated their Constitution when they folded to the opinion of Obergefell versus Hodges gay marriage. Your judges are idiots. That was an opinion. They crumbled. Your state constitution is greater than these courts' opinions. Okay. The First Amendment Clause of the United States Constitution and the Constitution of West Virginia. Any parent or legal guardian who wishes to have his child participate in any planned instruction in sex education at the public school or any instruction of presentation regarding sexuality shall opt in by filling written permission with the school district board of trustees. The board of trustees shall make an available and appropriate forms for such permission within 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you're going to see that it's framing out, everything that is not natural, neutral, or leads to human flourishing, and it is separating so that there are no tax dollars funding what is not natural. If you're whenever it is presented that of what to do with pregnancy options, if you talk about adoption, you have to talk about abortion. That's already in place in 13 states. They have to talk about abortion as much as they do adoption. So when you are, is abortion natural? Is it neutral? Does it lead to human flourishing? No. So when we are separating the states from talking and using the indoctrination of what is not natural, abortion, it's like how to give, also talking about hand jobs, how to give a hand job to your friend, and digital stimulation. Trust me, I thought that was funny too. So this is starting in kindergarten. Your genders, which is not scientific. And then, of course, we have everything that's not natural, neutral, and leads to human flourishing. This is a law to separate the states from that. So thank you for tuning in. I just want to give you an example of what it's like to read over a law and what our bill does to separate the states from funding what is not natural, neutral, nor leads to human flourishing. But we can't do it without you. I don't sound like South Dakota. I don't sound like Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina. We're only in 36 states because of Facebook followers. So do follow me, Jessica Joy with This Is My Story.Solutions on Facebook to be a part of this insanity. Now you're held accountable for what you know. The more you know.